yeah, if you want to share this later in your own networks and things, then we can just let each other know. You can send me, or say I wish to post here and there, and if everybody feels comfortable with it, then you can have it there, because I guess Sunday and also the time is not exactly an easy, and I think people would rather be offline somewhere and in the park or something like this. So in any case, yeah, maybe they would feel more inclined to watch it later. Yeah, so I will share with you just one moment what I prepared for us. Let me just see, I'm using another account here, so it's just getting used to.
Kika, your name happens to be Katja.
Yeah,
Is it?
Katja Helkut.
That's the thing, because I'm using her account because of Zoom.
Oh, I see.
Oh,
Yeah.
That demystified it. Okay.
I was looking at you and I was saying, wow, Kika's name is Katja.
I was like, these women look really alike.
Yeah, we're actually family, that's it.
Okay.
No, that's yeah, I didn't even realize that's true. I thought it would even have like account name like Citymakers or something, but I didn't look at it. It's true. Yeah, let me just I'll explain it to you, because the thing is, I think from all of you, Eva is the one who has been there for the longest in the network, so she's absolutely aware of who and so on. But I'll just can you see my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Yeah, so I'll show just a little bit, because maybe that's it. Besides Eva, not everybody is so super familiar with the entire thing. So just a very short introduction from our side. That is, we organized for this year 3 meetings. This probably started with the pandemic for everybody, but that we started to also take this opportunity to then gather the community that is so international, and have a chance to just every now and then check in, see how everybody's doing, and share some of the current projects and things that we are working on. And last year maybe we did something like I don't know, 4 or 5 events, and then this year we planned 3 of them. Yeah, and then just for a brief understanding about the Citymakers, it started off mainly with 2 people, and the person with the name in the thing, Katja Helkut, was one of them, and the other person was Oliver Radke, who worked for several years in the Bosch Foundation, and the Bosch Foundation even supported then the program for several years, I think officially for 5 years. And then Annie is probably familiar, maybe John too, because of the alumni. I would be curious to hear how exactly is your involvement in there as well. But there was a big change inside the foundation, and they stopped all the programs, and then they started a new. So from Annie's face, she doesn't know the story, but anyway, no, yeah. So there were really loads and loads of projects that were being supported by the foundation, and they changed the structure of things, and that's when actually the alumni network started. And then in a sense the Citymakers remained connected to Bosch through that, but not mainly being supported by it. So it's more like a parallel. Every now and then there are some things that they can help, but it's not like it's a program. It began, even kind of ran, so to speak, a bit by Bosch, but then it was legally allowed to have its own be independent in a sense. But besides that, what happened throughout this development is that a kind of a global village, that's why we call it like that, has been born, that we now have really in this network loads of people who are connected, who are working with kind of similar topics and so on. And yeah, whoever wants to check it out, this is the website. And the first event of the year actually happened because there is, even though the network is spread apart and so on, Katja has a space here in Berlin. The first event were these participants, and yeah, they were talking mainly about co-living, and then there's some, for example, Caitlin showed great research on like eco villages and things, and yeah, that was the first episode that we did this year. And in this case, it was in presence, and it was in the space that Katja runs here in Berlin, which is called C-Space. They have also co-working and spaces sometimes for exhibitions and performances and things. But this time we decided, no, we have to do this online. Oh yeah, the Bosch alumni, as you well know, as you both, John and Annie, are connected to, that I would be curious to hear about how you got there at all. And then, but this time we said, no, we need to do it online, because the main interest was to have really participants from all 3 continents. That was the because I thought it could be a very, very yeah, to generate a bit more of a different dynamic and be a little bit more even a bit provoking, because the context can be so different, that we can, yeah, just see that sometimes ways of operating and so on can be very different. But that's one of the purposes of the network at all, has always been like this, to establish dialogue between all of these cultures. And we do believe strongly that these differences, they actually can be very eye-opening, you know, from all sides. Yeah, and so that's why we today are going to go to these 3 different places, and then, not to take too much time, I wasn't really sure, I mean, how many people would come and everything, so I had given a thought about this, having the first part where you guys share what you all prepared, and then depending on how many people would come and so on, that we would divide ourselves in 2 little groups where we could focus. I think from everybody that I spoke to, there were 2 main focuses, and that was people who were directly working with water somehow, or other people. Many people wrote wanting to join because they were more involved in bottom-up initiatives and so on, and not necessarily directly related to water. So I thought we could divide it like this. But honestly, looking at the scene right now, I think we can see, and maybe we just make a discussion between all of us after that, and I think that's going to be just fine. Yeah. So with no more delay, I would like to give the word. As you saw, I did make a little bit of a sequence. You tell me also if you don't feel comfortable with that, but I thought we could start with Yuki, mainly because I was more directly involved with it as well. And then I can also say just a couple of words before you start. And so maybe, let me see if I can make you go. Yeah, so I now made you co-host, and you could this way probably share your screen. I will also put you both, Eva and Annie, as well, like that. Yeah, so you will. Hello, Sebastian. schön, dass du da bist. Yeah, so if I may just say a couple of words before we start, Guy, and then, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so this was an initiative that we started maybe to talk about a year and a half ago in Brazil, in São Paulo. It is actually the first initiative that is involving the Citymakers network in Brazil for the very first time. And what happened was that out of this intention of the group to act in Brazil, we made contact with the Goethe Institute in Sao Paulo. And then we started kind of brainstorming together, because this person there responsible for kind of the cultural department in the Goethe there, she is someone very involved with the environment, and she's herself an architect, and she's very well connected in her own network, and has been doing some stuff in the headquarters of Goethe as well, with the vegetable garden, reuse of water, and many things. And so we started brainstorming together what kind of project could we design together that would both join the theme focuses of the Citymakers and Goethe in Brazil. And then we got in connection with a third person who works for the environment department in São Paulo. And we then together picked a case. And the idea was mainly to explore that space. Initially, we wanted to focus in two things: in water and in green, so to speak, in biodiversity. It ended up that we focus more on water for more organizing aspects and things. And yeah, I think I will stop there, because I know that Guy prepared quite a few things, and he will explain more himself. He was the person, the expert that we brought in, and it was really, you know how things are in networks sometimes, that all of us involved knew already Guy, so it was kind of a no question, this is the right person to work with us. And it came really from different sides. And yeah, so I'm very honored and pleased that we can hear from him how was his involvement, and then he will also share a second case that he's working with. So thank you, Guy, and welcome.
Thank you. You know, it was not a coincidence at all. You know, Kika knew my wife before. I had heard of Kika through my wife a couple of years ago, and I had no idea it was the same Kika that a few of my friends mentioned to me too. So it was just really special to have this connection going. So anyway, I told you that I'm now in North Portugal, near the border of Spain, but I lived almost my whole life in Brazil, apart from a few years in Australia and a few other months across traveling. Through Beijing as well, but not through Bulgaria yet. So hopefully I'll be able to meet you in person, Annie, and also John in Kenya. I've been to Angola last month, and I'll go there again next November. So anyway, I wanted to share with you two different projects. This is going to be a short presentation, sort of illustrating what's being happening both in this project in São Paulo, in a plaza, in a praça Júlio César Vanini, and in Retumbana Velha, which is a project that I've been working with in Portugal since 2020 for 2 years. So I want to go on. Do you see my screen? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you see now it's a different image from yeah? Okay, cool. So this is it. We both projects are in a Portuguese-speaking country, but very different cultures and very far apart, nearly 8,000 kilometers far apart. And even though we derived a lot of our culture from Portugal, there are some special elements that were brought up by different people from different countries, from different cultures. So sometimes I would refer to Portuguese in Portugal as the same language, but now as I see, it's not the same language at all, not even the same culture, and especially not the same language. It's got some special elements that make it very far apart. And I'm gonna share with you these cases. And the first one is the Praça Júlio César Vanini. So just to help you locate where we're going, where we have worked. São Paulo is in the southeast of Brazil, and the São Paulo capital is just right here, and the Praça is actually in the metropolis. So you see this huge urban sprawl. This whole area is the urban São Paulo, which comprises of nearly 23 million people. So, and you can see there are only eventual green spots here and there inside the main urban area. You see quite a lot of green further south and a bit north, and almost none inside. A closer look into the city, and here is just São Paulo. This is a zoom in into a couple of neighborhoods close to the center of São Paulo. I grew up just here, where you see, if you can see my cursor here. And this place, this Praça, is further down, just a couple of kilometers. So roughly speaking, it's the same region. And here you can see a little bit more that it represents quite a lot of green area, quite a green block around lots of houses. You see that it's not a very dense, densely populated place. It is dense in the meaning that you have houses very next to each other, but there are no buildings in this area. And that makes it very different from the whole rest of the city. You see a few industrial warehouses further south, and this little canal was actually the Ipiranga River, which is theoretically the place where 200 years ago the Brazil was called independent from Portugal. And for me, it was interesting to be here, connected to this part of our history, and knowing that I would be coming to Portugal further on. And when Kika invited me to talk about these projects, I said, yeah, you know what? I'm going to talk about both. I'm going to talk about the Praça, and I'm going to talk a bit about the work that is happening in Portugal. But anyway, you see around not much green. You see eventually some few trees here and there, but this is definitely the only place that holds a larger space for trees and larger space for public recreation. And so this is very special and very unique in this area. And if you look further into it, and we can see the contour maps, and this gives us an idea of how steep this place is. So it's very steep from here further down, and we have a sports place here for soccer, basketball, and there is also a very steep way from here, from this street further down. So the only connection from the streets for the neighboring people living around here is from the bottom of this plaza, from further down here. There is a street that goes up this way, and from here there is a walkway going further up, and you can see this very fine line going through here. And then there was the whole issue of setting up a talk to discuss a bit with the community was the fact that there was a bit of a tension between old inhabitants, elders especially, older kids that loves to play soccer and football and being up until late at night, and they make some noise. And there is also a kindergarten school just further north, further up the Praça, and they also wanted to use the place. But there was this tension between all these different groups because each one of them had a different interest, and especially with the elders were a bit annoyed by the fact that some of the kids were coming and playing with the fruit trees and getting all the fruit trees, getting all the fruits, and they were not able to eat the fruits anymore. Some of the fruits they planted a few decades ago, and they were also disturbed with a noise by the kids, by the older kids that hang around the sports square most of the time. And there was this funny and interesting thing with this little spring running crystal clear water into that place. And so we started to talk to ourselves, and we realized that instead of trying to handle tensions within the different groups, we said, why don't we get water to be at the very center of this talk? And so we get these different groups together, and let's talk how we can get this place better for everyone, starting from the water, starting from the spring that is running there, that's always run there, and that a lot of people still use it for drinking, but they had no idea of how good that water was. So there were many questions, and then we said, oh, let's get together. This is the actual pipe that's got a spring water flowing through, and there's a little bucket here where they can collect water. So we, Kika, along with friends, set up this meeting in there to get everyone talking together. And we started off by listening to the elders. We got to hear some of these people who had been living there for over 30, 40 years to tell us a bit of what it was like, what it was this place 40 years ago, how was their relationship to that, and what were the stories that took place before they actually got there. And there was a lot of beautiful environment creation for everyone else to come and join us. And from there, we started joining everyone else. We started getting everyone together, and for a visit to the site and observing how water was flowing, how the trees were growing, what was the soil like in these different places. So each one of them could evaluate for themselves. Of course, we stopped by the fruit trees, and we had a bunch of blackberries and pitangas, a local native tree, local native fruit. And we had the opportunity to see a few of the assets this place has. We saw a few of the problems: gray water, dripping off some old pipes, not far from the springs. And then we said to start looking at some different images, with sort of inspiring images to bring us a sense of what it could be like. What were these elements? What were the elements present into this place, and how we could transform it using the resources we had. So instead of looking into wastewater as a problem, why not looking at it as a valuable resource, and how to look into the soil, into the perspective of recreating the soil and recreating opportunities for more planting, for more fruit trees. So the kids joined us, we had an opportunity for dreaming and thinking together a few of these issues, but that was just the beginning. We see that as a starting point where we can start off to mobilize the local community to keep the work happening. And from there, we had an artist along with us, and he put together all these different talks and ideas and the main themes that were brought up during that day, so we could have that recorded for the future. And also we managed to actually analyze the water, and we realized it's not fully potable, but it's almost there. It's quite clean. It's got a bit of nitrates, but all in all, it's a good water, and it's not complicated to get into full potable water quality, so that people can actually drink that water in a very healthy and very constructive way, in just like bringing a sense that they are in the midst this very urbanized setting, but still very closely connected to water and to the natural environment. And by jumping off straight to South Portugal, Retumbana Valley is located in the Alentejo region of Portugal, central south region, and you see Retumbana is just here, just very close to the Algarve and 50 kilometers inland from the coast. The Alentejo, I don't know if many of you are aware, but it's basically, it's a place that have been used for agriculture for centuries. And this is a typical landscape of cork oaks, cortiças in Portuguese. They have these large fields for taking off the cork from the trees. There's a lot of vineyards also there, but agriculture has been going down through the past few years. And what we've been seeing is the increase of very intensive monoculture, and over the last few years, very intense industrial agriculture in greenhouses. So that's a very important issue that is taking place there, because it's a dry place. It's a very dry place. It rains 600 millimeters in average, but this year it's going to less than half of it, or to nearly half of it, to nearly 300 millimeters. And a lot of what we can feel is that the changing the landscape to more industrialized landscape, even agricultural landscape, is helping to worsen up climate change effects. And so we're having this huge impact, especially in rivers and also in wells, generally speaking. So to locate you a little bit further, Retumbana is just south of Tamera. Tamera is an eco village set up by Germans in the late 90s, and is also a place world renowned for what we call water retention landscapes. And they have been building ponds, both temporary and permanent, and swales and check dams, and major elements to help create a water retaining landscape, helping water to be retained and to be stored in this place. And Retumbana is just further down south. It's very next door neighbor, and that brings a different and special character to it. So this is an old shallow well, traditional Portuguese well. You can see it's all facing with rocks, and maybe a 10, 15 centimeters deep puddle of water. It's not enough water to allow access anymore. What is happening now is that a lot of that agriculture, industrial agriculture, is pulling out water from from the underground aquifers, both from the shallow aquifers and mostly from the deep boreholes. And the fact is that we know that these boreholes or furos, like they say here, they have a very different time frame related to the shallow water table, because water takes sometimes hundreds, even more than 1,000 years to go from top to bottom. So it's being overexploited, and even the boreholes now are starting to become dry. So Retumbana, we started to work in a transition plan for Retumbana. And this is a small community made up today with 6 to 7 people, fixed living there. And we started off with composting toilets, where the composts are taken to the food gardens and urine is recycled as a liquid fertilizer. We also built in 2020 cisterns that now hold 100 cubic meters of rainwater for usage along the year. So rainwater now is the main water source in Retumbana, and the borehole is now the second water source. Next year, a new building is going to be rebuilt, and this is going to add another 150 square meters. And we hope that we're gonna be 100% supplied by rainwater. Apart from that, we also work with greywater. So part of it is used for passive irrigation for fruit trees in the gardens. And part of it, as part of a flexible system, sometimes we direct that water to the fruit trees, and sometimes to the reed beds, to constructed wetlands, where water is actually purified and used in the food gardens. You see here this beautiful yellow lily and a little frog. They are here. They're just here in this small pond here. By then, we also planted 3 different patches of agroforest with very drought-proof plants. We started with prickly pears because we knew we wouldn't have that much water to irrigate them. And this photo on the right is a photo taken just a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, when I got there, and we had this first pear hanging out of the fruit tree. It was beautiful to be there again, just 2 years later, and seeing those fruits coming up. And also we have built a first water retention pond in Retumbana. The idea is to carry on the work with water retention landscapes further along this year, and build more ponds, more check dams, and more swales to help water being infiltrated into the water table, so we can then access water in those shallow wells again. And that's it. Thank you. It was a very, very quick, but I hope enough to share a little bit of what we've been doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy. I see that Eva has her hands up, not up, but clapping.
Thank you.
I think we can open a bit like spontaneously, and just if we have already some comments and questions that came up in your mind, feel free to use the space, because I think now everything is still fresh in our minds. Maybe in the end we can do an overall talk together, but then we can go specific to the presentations once the stuff is a bit fresh in the head. I do have one question concerning like, for example, these boreholes where they extract the water. But not only that, these initiatives and projects are being done now. Whose initiative is that? Are they organized by the community? You said it is a German community that is there. Do they do that privately? Is there some sort of a cooperation, public-private? How do they organize that, Guy?
Tamera is an eco village that has, I think, nearly 250 people living in there. And they've been offering courses since 2007 on water retention landscapes. They actually established the first pond in a course by an Austrian farmer called Sepp Holzer. And from there on, Tamera started to sort of spread out the word on that term, water retention landscapes, and how to transform that into a movement. So Tamera is one of the leaders, I would say. And apart from the courses, they also offer consultancies, and many people in the region have had their ponds built with Tamera, with people from Tamera and from companies that have sprung up from those initiatives. So there are different companies around working into spreading that. And across the world, there are different places, different people doing that. There is another student from Sepp Holzer, which is called Zach Weiss, and he's doing that in the US. I'm not exactly where, but anyway, it's in Retumbana. It was built by a crew from Tamera, but with resources from Retumbana.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
I think Sebastian had his hand up. I don't know if he wants to bring a question as well.
Yes, so thank you all, and thank you very much for this beautiful projects. Really nice. So the one in Sao Paulo, I'm interested if the older people who lived there since many decades, how did the place change in this time? So was it before more a water place? Was it looks like more being like a basin or a river, or somehow this, if there is this spring and you have this this descent there, and maybe it was also shaped by water, like the surface is more like a small valley, or so this would be interesting because the urbanization is maybe not that old in that area, or is it already like 40 years ago was that urbanized? And it maybe, so this would be interesting how people experience this change there in the neighborhood.
Yeah. Perhaps if you want to say something, Kika, I can say, but if you want.
I can say a little bit, yeah. So I think historically, Sebastian, it's like this that we, and I mean, with details and more, please help me out, Guy, but it is occupied since, I couldn't tell exactly precisely, but for sure more than 50 years, if not 100 already. If probably they did kind of preparations and things and had the plots, but slowly it had been a bit, not a farm, but was owned by, first by one owner, and then they, you know, divided it and then sold it and started, you know, the development a little bit like that. But I think in terms of the water itself, there is this important chapter that we discussed there, that was this principle of channeling the waters and covering and, you know, directing it all the way to the rivers and things. That was a bit of a general policy that was followed for many years, which I believe goes along with you know, the methodologies that were used all around the world, actually, which was believed to be the best solution. And then now it's the understanding is different, no? Of that, and at least the oldest ones that were there were around 40 years, and they didn't report all that much about the water. What they did say was, or as far as I remember, was their involvement with the biodiversity, as in they themselves had planted quite a lot of new trees and also fruit trees there in the square, which is, on one hand, one could say there is less control perhaps in Brazil. I'm not sure if that would have been possible in another city, say in Germany, that someone just starts planting trees here and there. Very likely not. So on one hand, it's good that there's not that much control. But on the other hand, it was their service, in a way. That's why it's also this cultural difference, and why I feel that this community element and the bottom-up initiatives, in some places they make more difference than others, because if you have a very organized and structured state, then many of these things are being thought already and being done already. But if you don't have that structure, then you need somehow the few ones who are a little bit more educated, who are interested and so on, so they can, from the civil society, start such processes themselves, and sometimes even influence in the meeting that we had. I find it very nice that in the two cases that you showed, Guy, they are these two different stages. No? So the first case is absolutely fresh. It was on a level in São Paulo of only more like consciousness. There is a little bit of a community that is there, but there is not that much of a, there is in other similar areas in São Paulo, they really have organized themselves in associations and things, and they are more structurally working together as bottom-up initiatives, where in this case, not yet. It's like a little bit like isolated groups that do things by themselves. And the water, as we said, was not really that present in the discussions. It was more about the green. And so it's this absolute initial phase of starting to encourage that movement to grow. Whereas in the second case, you have really a lot more people, and people who have been there in the space for a longer time and bringing more and more knowledge in, and already in action for quite some time. So for me, it was also nice to have, we would have wanted to reach with Goethe a proper concrete step, as in, you know, either building something or doing something in the space, so that they can have a little bit of an inheritance materially of something that's left there for them, you know, to build up upon. But from the size of the project, that didn't happen. So it was nice to have this contrast of how far can things go, no? Once you organize more and more in structure. And yeah, I spoke a lot more than you actually asked, Sebastian, but I hope that that gives you a bit of a perspective of how things are there.
So maybe there is a possibility that water is getting more in use in that place. If it's not that under control, maybe people can just have activities with water, or can they use it for building water basins or watering plants? Or it looked more like a public park, which is under maintenance, or
it is.
So there is, it's not that people use it as they want, so they plan and do things,
Not fully, but you know, it's Brazil, so the local service, the official public service doesn't control that much. I mean, they are there, they do some maintenance, but the local neighborhood, they have been looking after this place mostly, and so they feel empowered to do the improvements they feel like. And I bet they wouldn't have any trouble going out with it. Because if you don't do it in Brazil, if you don't do it, and if you wait for someone to do it for you from the government, whether local, state government, it's not going to happen unless you know someone who can spare the resources and sort of orchestrate that for you. So there is not much sense in waiting. That's why people get their hands on and they work together, and we call what we call in Portuguese mutirões, like getting people together and let's work towards one aim. So the aim of that weekend, of that meeting, was looking at it, just bringing up a different perspective and getting people talking. I think that was the most important aspect, getting people from different niches, from different stories together to talk, to look into each other's eyes and to have a feel of each other, because there was really a lot of tension and there was no space for talking before. So it's setting up the place and the space for us to work further. And I hope we can join and work together in the coming months.
One of the most beautiful moments was right at the end, after we were a couple of hours there, and then just a young guy appears out of the blue, and he, a bit like a rap almost way of speaking, he comes and says, "I saw you guys from above there. I looked and I said, I have never seen a group like this. I was very curious because I lived here my entire life." And then he says, "Now I had to check what you guys are doing here. And now that I hear that you're interested in improving this space, I want to say I'm with you." I've never seen something like this, and I'm very happy that something is happening, and I want to support and so on. And that was an amazing moment, because in the end, that's exactly what we were aiming for. And we had like a list of contacts with everybody who was there, which was about 20 people or something, that they can then connect to one another. Because we externally, we're not a part of it. Now we can just give an impulse. But maybe they can now, once they are in touch with each other, then things move on. And apparently after that, they are meeting more regularly, almost once a week there. Probably not everybody all the time, but at least there has been a little bit more of rhythm of something happening there, which is pretty nice. Yeah. Thank you, Guy, for sharing. Yes. I think if anybody else has another direct pulsing comment or thing, if not, then we can move continents. Then I would, Annie, yeah, I see you.
Where to? Yeah, I'm wondering, are we going again back east, or what's the direction?
So yeah, no, I would like please to invite you to speak next. The idea of a process of thought was also a bit relating to the because as he showed, there was the first one just a consciousness thing, and then the other ones in Portugal already in being in progress, so to speak, and it's a different, and you have a little bit of both actually, no? And so I would definitely go there. And Eva is actually going to, Eva's not going to talk about a specific project or something like that. She's going to give us a bit of a broader perspective from the third continent. So that's why even in the invitation, it was already in the sequence, so that Eva then comes and wraps it up from a broader perspective. Yeah, so please,
cool.
The space is yours, Annie.
Let's see. Share my screen. So hopefully, okay. Slideshow. All right, can you all see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so first of all, it's really an honor to be in such an international and global group. Our projects are very, very local. But listening to Guy, I really realized there's so much in common, which is fascinating. We're working in very specific places in the city, and still there is this resonance. I'll also speak about two projects in relation. So these are the rivers of Sofia as they still look today when our interventions are not happening. They really remind me of this canal that we saw on the map in Sao Paulo, close to the park. And it's a similar idea of the role of rivers and streams in the city. So as Kika, you mentioned something like this. This was the best engineering solution at the time to control flooding so that the city can expand. You would channel waterways in these artificial beds. So these were completed in the 1940s. They are really valuable for the city as water resources and history. So these hewn stones from the 40s are even listed national cultural heritage. But as you can see, they're not in the best condition. So there are stones missing, there's concrete that's been poured onto the stones regardless of the status. And maybe this is not so surprising because there is no way to access these spaces. There's just no connection between the two levels, between the street and the river. You can all hear me okay, right? So actually water is an incredibly important resource in the city of Sofia, of course. This is a fairly universal thing that settlements would be made close to water. But, even more so here, this is a city just founded on springs. There are 75 tapped mineral springs just in the city of Sofia, and there are many cultural traditions around these springs. Since ancient times, they have been used. Apparently, one of the mountains close to us was a volcano back in the day, so there is a lot of these hot springs because of that. And this is historic heritage as well. So from Ottoman times and even the Roman Empire before that, people would bathe, and that would be part of the experience of the city, and there would be many of these baths kind of as public infrastructure. So there are these narrative writings from Lady Mary Montagu, who in the 18th century, in the 1700s, traveled to Sofia, and she wrote these memoirs about the baths, and that women would go there once a week, stay at least 4 or 5 hours without getting cold, immediately coming out of the hot bath into the cold room, which was surprising to me. She was discovering this local bathing in water tradition that was about socializing as well. And by the streams as well, people would like water livestock there as well. This was an important part of the life of the city. But now water remains more isolated. So 68% of the tapped springs that we have are not utilized, and their usage has been decreasing. And with the rivers, I showed you their condition. It shows that they too have just been removed from the life of the city. This is the whole country with the major rivers. Here we are in Sofia. So especially in these times of droughts, water is an especially important resource that we have. And this is a map of the city from the 1920s. And here you can see the two main rivers whose condition I showed you, hemming in the downtown. So they have determined urbanism and the growth and development of the city now for a century. And even before that, it was just situated between them. So that's why it's surprising that their condition is the way it is right now, that they've just remained isolated and there are these dead spaces in the center of our capital city. And so there is the problem of just the condition of the water resources, that they're inaccessible. The water also is unclean. There is some sewage runoff because of problems with the sewage system and water drainage in the city. And the other problem is one of civic engagement, really. I would be interested to hear more about how civic engagement works in the other contexts we're talking about. Most of Bulgaria, according to research from this year, falls into the civic desert category, which means that people do not feel they have a voice, that they can change anything in their environment, so they're not motivated to participate. And there also aren't even spaces like the one that was created in the park in Sao Paulo that function as a place to really meet and discuss and make decisions together. 84% of people polled in this project in 2021 said that they feel isolated from decision-making about their city, about Sofia, which is, it wasn't a huge sample size, it was a few hundred people, but still this is a pretty staggering number, that in our city, you know, the vast majority of people feel that they can't really affect things for the better. So again, we get these spaces where nobody is happy with this, but there just isn't the sense that, oh, I could do something about it. It's the way Guy was saying, this is Brazil, it's a bit like this is Bulgaria, you know, so you can't expect that someone in authority will necessarily take responsibility unless there is a lot of incentive from below. So we set out to change these things. The idea was that we could actually do something about it and just be an example of showing that this could look completely different. So the collective, our team, is coming from architecture and design and urbanism in some capacity. So this is the way that we think and address these issues. And so we thought we would just transform them. That was the original idea. Let's just make these spaces, which are the most rundown and most undesirable in the whole city, that just make them something that's nice, that's enticing, where people can gather. Let's just use design to make that happen. And then bring people there. And so we did that in a few ways. The first and main one was these pop-up interventions, which used very simple and accessible materials. As you can see, this is industrial scaffolding, which you would use on a building being renovated or constructed, which created this missing connection between the street level and the water level, so people could access them. And this was a pretty important moment, because for people who have lived their whole lives in Sofia have never been down there. And so we had thousands and like tens of thousands of people after several iterations of the festival that were able to access the rivers and to say, like, oh, actually it's not so bad. This is a space where we could be. We could be adjacent to the water and close to it. It's not something scary and something to turn away from. And so just decoration and these simple structures were the basis for this, plus then a lot of events. Then we also, in the second year, started to do more of these design workshops, especially in another project on the Danube in Ruse. This is a city north from here. And there we worked with local students a lot, who over a series of many workshops were able to find their own vision for what they would like to have in public space and to make a model of it, so then we could build it together. Because again, this problem of people not engaging, not feeling like they could own their shared space is really prevalent in all cities in the country. And it's also the general case that spaces close to water are not, they remain disconnected. Like our rivers are, because of these water engineering solutions about flood control from the last century. They just remain as these inaccessible artificial canals oftentimes. So we did site visits, observation, ideation, and then these young people were able to say what they wanted to have there. And these were students from vocational schools who have the skills to effect change in their lived environment, but at the same time have less access to extracurricular activities and to access to like competitions or mentorship from professionals. So this was a kind of 2-in-1 project to show them professional opportunities, but also show them, hey, you can change your city. That's some of my colleagues with the students that we worked with. So we did movement exercises, like all kinds of things to get the imagination flowing. And then the third tactic that we use, in addition to design workshops and pop-up interventions, is media and social media. In this case, the young people are narrating what they would like to have by the river to the local media. And this is extremely important. We have like a large social media presence as well, and this helps as an exercise of creating a better image for rivers, really, and showing them as places that should be accessible, that should be active public space. In Sofia, it was even an exercise of changing vocabulary, because they would just be called canals, these spaces. And canal has a double meaning of both canal, but also like a sewer. So that created very negative connotations. So we just repeated this brand, essentially, the rivers of Sofia, and now we notice that more and more people, like in the press and reports about this, they're just using this phrase and calling them rivers, which they are. They're clean mountain streams that come down into the city. And so that perception of them as natural places and accessible places just switches the idea of what's possible. And then after these interventions created more publicity and more engagement and more people who visited, we've also been able to engage more with decision makers, because when there's something happening on the ground and people are involved, then you have a much stronger argument. And you see that tens of thousands of people visited this festival and they want to be near the rivers, so these spaces are not neglected, and there is a strong public interest to make them better. And so this is us with members of the city council and also the water utility company that has been quite perceptive. So we're now talking about possible larger scale engineering solutions, like more reservoirs for the runoff rainwater, so that it doesn't all drain instantly into the rivers and get mixed in with sewage, which is what happens, so that these places could be cleaner and safer to use all year round. So this is now the very long game to be working with decision makers to create permanent change, and that could take many, many years, but at least we have this strong base that even we're having the conversation and thinking of solutions. And so these are the 4 ways, with the pop-up interventions and workshops, media coverage, and these working groups with decision makers, that we've been able, at least temporarily, to change this condition into something a bit more like this. In the photo also from the flyer, this is the first Rivers of Sofia festival in 2020. So it's just access down to the river with design and decoration, lighting, and events that just for a fairly low budget transformed the space instantly. It created access also across both of the banks. And so it was really surprising to everyone involved and to all the visitors, like how little was needed to turn the place around and to make it a gathering space for people and for different generations. This is some photos from this year's festival. The most important thing is that people are now there. They see that the water is clean, apart from, these incidents when there is runoff after heavy rain. Actually, these are clean mountain streams, and they can be places where we spend our time together close to nature, right here in the middle of the city, which in a very, very dense city, becoming ever denser, is an important public resource. We now have a lot of children down there and dedicated children's activities, so that there will be a generation of kids, or a number of them at least, who will have had access to these waterways in the city. That wouldn't be something that they never saw up close. And this is also from this year. Again, a mass of people down there, and space that looks abandoned and hopeless for much of the year, and now suddenly it's gathering a crowd. So it's quite a powerful thing to see. And these, even though this only lasts for about a week out of the year, it gives this momentum throughout the whole year to campaign for change. And this is its relation. This is one of our main locations, and it's on a very, very, very busy street. So we are reclaiming more space close to nature in a car congested city that people should be able to access, which then opens up possibility for green mobility by the river, for recreation, and for reimagining our public space is less about cars and overbuilding, and also shared space down by the river. So this opened up this possibility to be there together and imagine what would happen. And we already won a competition also to create permanent public space down there, so that this square, which was only a square in name before, could now become public space permanently. So we expanded also out here this year, and people were hanging out here in the middle of the roadway as well, which was pretty cool. So now we're taking these pop-up interventions with more and more participation into something permanent, hopefully. Yeah, so I'll try and stop screen sharing now. Okay. So this is our fairly little project with temporary things slowly becoming permanent, we hope. And we just started with try to do what we can with what we have, and it's super exciting to see that things like this are happening across the continents. That's awesome.
Awesome, Annie. Thank you very much for sharing with us. And I must say, because we within this network of the Bosch alumni and our own network, we opened up the space for other people who would be involved with the themes in water to have a space today to exchange, and we got a lot of people interested in I must say, when I received your images, I was quite impressed, because you guys have already achieved a couple of powerful images, no? And I mean, okay, we live in an image world, but they are not only images. One could sense that, you know, what happened there was powerful really in itself. It's not a fake montage, decoration thing, but you know, especially from the I think there was an enormous ability in design to identify, as you say, simple elements that already would make a lot of change in the space. And at the same time, your social marketing capacity of just, you know, advertising this and gathering as many people as this is really quite impressive. So from my side, at least, congratulations on that. I find quite amazing. I would just shoot a couple of things that popped into my mind, but yeah, John is also clapping. And then whoever also has any, you know, interest in things, please feel free to ask further. But some just thoughts crossed my mind, as in, definitely there's this distance between, or the relationship at all, to the water, and as you say, this perception of something negative and dirty when it's actually not. And I was thinking maybe the size of a river also makes a big difference, perhaps. I guess if you have in São Paulo, we have two main ones. I don't know how big the Ipiranga was, that one that was channelized, but the other two ones, they are a bit too big for you to put on the channel. So I guess they almost didn't have a chance. You know, it would have meant an enormous engineering thing to be done. And I was looking at the map that you showed, and it seemed like it is full of water, but it's almost like more like a fine structure. If you had, instead of this fine little spread structure, one huge thing crossing in the middle, as many cities do, then then maybe that would also make a difference in changing the relationship.
That's interesting. I haven't thought about it really, but there was an opportunity in smallness, really, to same as maybe the Sao Paulo project as well. It's so small and it's so local that, you know, everyone knows it, but also it seems almost small enough to not care. And that was an interesting thing to turn around, to show that actually, you know, it seems so narrow as well, especially when it's empty, and then it's like, oh, you can put something down there, and then the perception of scale changes a bit. But yeah, actually that's an interesting lesson in maybe not overlooking small forgotten spaces, not just something that, and also because they were so small, I guess they haven't really attracted some grandiose development project. So that too makes them a good opportunity. Yeah, it's also very interesting what you said about images. Like, we've been thinking about that also, like coming from backgrounds related to architecture, like how people often interact with architecture just through images these days. You know, you see like simulations, renders, videos of what a project would look like, and that's how we're supposed to get to know, like imagine what's possible. But at least for the majority of people, it seems to really make a difference to experience it in the real space. That really seemed to matter. Like, if we had just shown images, like a montage, a collage of this, like, oh, this is what it could look like, I don't think it would have made. And then also in a culture which is just, there's so much distrust of government and local authorities, like I mentioned. Like, if there's something that is just proposed as a plan, I don't think that it would even engender enough trust. So it seemed like a much more powerful tool for imagination to really put it there, like to put a mock-up of what could be there, so people could really engage with it. So it made it believable. It really was it was a real change in the environment, which is maybe something harder to see. And so it generated more hope that way, I think.
Yeah, you gave them a chance to experience for themselves, right? It's not only imagination, it's not only on an intellectual level, but they lived it, no? They were next to the river, it's not smelling, they see the color of the water, and yeah, I think that definitely
so made it's still a performance in a way. It's still meant to like just create a nice image, but it's more than that also.
How long did you guys, like from the initial intentions and so on to doing one of your first, say, kind of festival things, how long did you take, and how exactly did you involve the people and the finances of it? How did you structure the process? No? Because even if the solutions were simple, you still needed a bit of a budget for that as well, no?
Or like the generous budget, if we're comfortably provided for, everything would be like 50,000 euros. We had the first 2 years less than half of that, but kind of made it work anyway. So the initiative was started by my colleague Martin Yankov. He was the founder of the first festival and then the foundation as a whole in 2020. And the organization was established in March of that year, and the festival was in September. So like that's one thing that's just been generating energy around this, is that it's happening just so quickly, which is interesting that it's part of placemaking theory. We later realized to try and do lightning fast change with fewer resources, but that's how instinctively we were doing it. So it was a few months from idea Speaking of working, I'm sorry about that. I'm in a house under renovation, so often at work that's our reality, but now it's mine here. So, it's under construction, whether it's our working spaces or living spaces. So I apologize. So yes, it was very quick, and then the way it generated finances for the first edition and most of the finances for the second and third one as well was donations or sponsorships from private companies, because when you start without a portfolio or without a formal organization even just yet, that was much more accessible. So we used corporate social responsibility of local companies that were willing to donate in exchange for a bit of advertising. So choosing who you work with, that's how the capital could be generated too. And a lot of it also has been just help, from relatives and friends too. So there was enough capital generated, and then a PR agency, impact agency from Sofia was involved as well from the first year. So this publicity and establishing the brand in a way has been a part of this from the beginning, and trying to involve different talents. So both the design, but also, publicity is an important part of the work. And then after that, the idea was tested and it was quite successful. So the idea is like, okay, let's make this into an organization and develop the project further. This was a one-time thing, but then it became a lasting thing. So I came along in January after that, and with the idea of developing this as an organization. And then we started also going to different cities, and we started thinking about how to use this tested method for more public engagement as well. So when we started in Ruse, which is my hometown by the Danube, we started with actively involving the local students, and we chose vocational school students there as a group because they really, because of the skills and the potential that they have, but also the fact that they are fairly excluded from opportunities like these kinds of schools where you learn like carpentry and building or working with textiles. And they're seen as not prestigious here. And there's the amount of resources that they have is fewer. And students tend to be excluded from cultural life as well. So we thought, why not show them that public space could be theirs? And we worked with a group of 25, 26 students, both in 2021 and 2022. And then they developed the design, and we built the design that they wanted for a space by the Danube. So it wasn't completely total democratic inclusion of everybody, but it was a group that we worked with of locals that had ownership of that space. So that was a way to not make it, especially because we were coming from Sofia, I'm from there, but we work here. And so we wanted to engage local people and to get the feel of what they would like to create it together with them. And it's been like the collective, we just aim to connect more audiences and also more organizations and more decision makers. And so on the other hand, we've been trying to work with people on the ground, but we've also been trying to work with the municipalities and with the Ministry of Environment and with whoever is responsible for these rivers. It's really a bureaucratic tangle. Like the stones are one agency is responsible for, and the water is the Ministry of Environment, but the stones are the Ministry of Culture because they're historic, but the street level is the municipality. But this location, Lionsbridge, which I showed you quite a number of pictures from, there's like 3 boroughs that meet there, and they have 3 like borders between the 3 boroughs right at that space, so neither of them wants to touch it. So, and then it's like roads or something else altogether. So it's like 5 different authorities plus that might be responsible for one such place. And then it's like in Brazil, I guess you just have to do it and start somewhere and then try and get as many of them to go along. So this is important work to do that kind of work with people, because we've noticed it's when you're working with the authorities, you're still working with people, and that's important as well. Like if you just file formal petitions, no one's going to pay attention, but you have to just do meetings and engage them in that way. So and we're hoping to really expand this model of student workshops further, and next year we really will focus on that and holding more workshops to harvest ideas from local people over a number of days, and to put their ideas into designs, which then we can again test out and get more feedback from more people about, like, okay, is this what you would like to have by the river, and then to take this knowledge to the responsible people, to the municipality that will develop these spaces for the years to come, and to just make that connection in that way, from to show that people have ideas for their spaces, and to then bring them to people who could put them permanently into place. So it's really ongoing. Like we're figuring out the process still as we're going along.
The student part reminds me a little bit, Sebastian, of the JAS, Jugendarchitekturstadt, and that they organize that also, bringing this consciousness about urbanism, urban spaces, and design, that can be, well, it is something that makes a difference in everybody's life, and having from at somewhat young age contact with that is, yeah, can be very, very, a part of your establishing your citizen identity, really, no? as a part of that. Yeah,
we really, I mean, also you were asking how I ended up in the Bosch alumni network. So we were part of, with the Ruse project, the one by the Danube, with the students, we were part of Civic Europe, which is a Bosch program, in part Bosch and Mitost, in Germany. And so I think they really shaped our thinking and helped us think of ways to work with public engagement, and to see that what we're doing is a tool for local democracy, really, because if you don't start with the spaces out of your front door and in your city as something that should be decided on with people, that they should feel connection to, that they should care about, like, this is really where it starts in our shared space, and that this is an important tool to get people to believe that they can change something, and to try together to do it. So, we had meetings with the students and the mayor, so he could hear what they had to say as well. So we recognize that actually thinking of public space together and working on ideas for it is very important in terms of civic education and action.
Yeah. This is for you also, John, the main reason, not that the part that you connected the most with your activities there, right? Yeah. So I remember he also wrote, and he said they are having more educational projects. Is that right, John? Yeah, wonderful. Anybody else would like to ask Annie anything? Yeah.
I have countless questions, but I'm not gonna make all of them now. But I definitely want to talk further. It was really inspiring, because now for the past year we've been dreaming about a water festival in Sao Paulo.
Awesome.
Basically into the same terms you brought here.
Oh, great.
Just getting people together, different organizations working together with the same aim. So it was a festival that would not bear any names from anyone involved. It would not bring my company's name or my or other initiatives, but it was a collective effort, a joint effort for water, and just it. And one of my partners into this is a local organization called Rio Sofia, which is basically streets and rivers, which is made up of basically two people, one geographer and one urban architect. And our idea was really getting a whole festival together to get people being more in touch with other aspects of water, like water as the main element, but having people singing and having dance and having dance classes and theaters and activities for kids, and like just really what you showed us, it was really matching our ideas. And we were aiming to do that this year, this past 25th of September, which is the Tietê Day. Tietê is the main river that crosses São Paulo. But I received this invitation to come to Portugal, and I had to come. So it was postponed, but we'll definitely do. And I hope to be in touch with you and hopefully get you aboard. Maybe I'm gonna show them our recording. I'm glad you recorded, Kika, because then I can show it to them. But then eventually I'm gonna call you to help us bring a few different ideas and a different perspective. Thank you. Brilliant work. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Well, we'll be happy to like talk further and share what we've learned the hard way, I guess, after going through this. But yeah, the main thing, I guess, is that it works. Yeah, if you use the resources of a lot of other organizations and various like artists locally and clubs for like kids activities, many of them are just happy sometimes to get out and show their work and engage more people. And yeah, it's a lot of work and unexpected things, but it it works in the end. So I hope this has been inspirational. That's great. I would love to see what happens in Sao Paulo. Amazing. Yeah, and it really inspired us to think about the water conservation. Yeah, or the ecology and the ecological landscape design aspect of that. That was incredible. So yeah, we'll be thinking much more about that.
Count me in, Yi.
Just let me say goodbye. So great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Sebastian.
We didn't
Bye-bye.
really have a chance to introduce you properly, but Sebastian is a very active person. The last thing I'll just mention that the last thing he organized was an entire biennale about landscape that happened just recently. So yeah, maybe next time we have more time to exchange, but
I'm still recovering from that.
I could imagine.
Hope you have lots of rest time. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry for being that short in time. Would love to discuss more and more.
Hope we can do
So
that.
see you all again soon.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Anybody else would like to address directly something to Ani? If not, then I would give the space for our last continent speaker. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, okay. I try to share my screen. Okay.
Yeah.
Just
Seem to have worked.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see. Okay. Thank you very much, Tika, for the kind invitation, and I'm very honored to speak here. I will not present like the other speakers my own project, but I have been doing many years ago research on water in Beijing. I wrote my PhD thesis on the Beijing water management, and at present now I'm in Beijing, and the photo actually is the river nearby where I live now and where my office is. It's the Liangmahe, and I'm going a little bit talk about how this river was renovated recently. And I think what we all share in our presentations is maybe the transformation of urban rivers and to discover urban rivers as a recreational space for urban people, and that in former times and not maybe also 20 years ago, rivers were only regarded as sewers and as maybe for transportation, but not as green space and as space people could in urban areas could use also for recreation. And this happens now recently in China, in Chinese urban planning more and more, that they reinvent the urban rivers, but this is more a top-down thing. You know, the political system in China is more that the municipal government invests a lot of money, and then there is not so much coming from the people, but there is also some NGO involvement, and I'm going to talk about this as well. I was also asked to give a little bit a broader picture. My research at that time was basically a little bit on the Beijing water crisis, because this huge city is located in an area which is very scarce of water resources. China as a country has a lot of water, but the water resources are uneven distributed. Whereas the south has plenty of water, especially the north and the northwest are more arid areas. And Beijing, on average, has precipitation of 600 millimeters, which is not so much. It's comparable to Berlin or Brandenburg, but it differs a lot from years to years, and you can have 7 consecutive years of drought, and then you have maybe only half of this or 300 millimeters of rainfall. This map also shows you that a map made by the World Resources Institute, that Beijing exactly is in a region with which is defined as a region with severe water stress. And the water stress means that the surface water is not sufficient for example, for irrigation, and that there's a lot of overuse of groundwater, for example. The Beijing municipality, it's a huge area with also a lot of formerly rural areas and mountains, and in the plain area there is the city proper. It has not only a few smaller rivers, but it's the water supply comes mainly from 2 reservoirs which have been built in the 1950s and 1960s. One in the west, Guanting Reservoir, and the one here, the Miyun. The Guanting Reservoir has unfortunately a very bad water quality, so it cannot be used for drinking water, whereas the Miyun Reservoir is the main drinking water supply. This photo I took myself back in 2004, almost 20 years ago. That was a time when Beijing really had a very, very severe water crisis. And this shows you the main drinking water reservoir of the city at that time. And basically it should be filled up, like you could see here, the line where it would be filled up, but it was almost dried out. And what also happened, the reservoir is fenced off because it's a drinking water reservoir. But the farmers in that area, they reclaimed the area of the reservoir which had fallen dry, and used it as fields. That was a situation in 2004. I have been there recently. Now the reservoir is full because there was a lot of rainfall in recent years. This is also a map from the Beijing Environmental Bureau, also back in 2001, and it shows the water quality, and it shows everything what the rivers marked in blue, or including the Mion Reservoir. This is water of very good quality, and it's transported into the city, but everything what goes out towards the east, leaves the city, is basically used as sewers. It's brown and very bad water quality. But this is also, of course, back in 2001, and this situation also changed a lot. Today, there was a lot invested into wastewater treatment plants, and actually a lot of the water now treated by the wastewater treatment plants can be reused also as water for to fill up the urban rivers. As I said, a lot of the initiatives is top down, but there were also are still initiatives from local NGOs. There is a local NGO called Green Earth Volunteers, and they started from 2007 on, and I think it's going on until today. Every Saturday, they organize walks along or hikes. You could also say sometimes it's hikes, also going to the mountains, to the springs of the rivers, but also starting from the middle of the center of the city, following the river out of the city, and then also taking, for example, taking some water, testing the water quality, looking what kind of plants are there, what is happening with the waters. And this guy, Zhang Yunfeng, he is the organizer of these walks, and I participated in a few of this, and it was very, very impressive also to see when you start in the middle of the city with a high-rise building and the 5-star hotels, and then you walk more and more out of the city, and you come then to the poorer parts of the cities where the migrants lived, and and you learn also by walking down these rivers, you learn a lot also about the city. But this chart is also, it shows you how the water used in Beijing changed in the first decade of the 21st century. And it shows you also the red line, how the city saw a huge population increase. So this population has also been served with water, and the living standard of the water of the people also rose, and so they live in better apartments. They have bathrooms now. In the 1980s, a lot of people, they went once a week maybe to a public bathhouse, or they not even had a toilet in their flat. They went to a public toilet. They changed a lot, and in the early times in the 1980s, a lot of the water was used for the agriculture in the in the counties in the of Beijing administration. This changed. The agriculture water use was down, but because the city grew, and also for example, in the 1980s, I remember there were still rice fields in and wheat fields. That this is not the case anymore. It's on if there is agriculture in the suburbs of Beijing, it's more vegetables. And what also decreased is the industrial water use, and this has a reason, because for the 2008 Olympics, Beijing closed down a lot of industries, including a huge steel factory that was moved to another province. And what we see here, and this increased now even more, is what they call the ecological water use. And the ecological water use is that you use to for the urban rivers, or sometimes also to create new lakes and urban waterways. And Beijing could improve the urban water because they have the luxury since 2014 that there is more water available from the south. There's a huge engineering project completed. They have built 2 canals diverting water from the Yangtze area to Beijing and Tianjin. Originally, these canals were planned not only to serve Beijing and Tianjin, but also to serve the provinces here, Henan and Hebei, which are very important agricultural sites. And they actually have a severe water problem and a problem with declining groundwater levels. And the problem is that this project was very, very expensive, and the provinces, when they use the water, they have to pay, of course, for the water they use. And there are certain quota which province can use how much of the water, but obviously the provinces downstream, they don't buy the water. So Beijing has at the end of the canal, they have a lot of water, and so they can now think of this is an image how this canal looks like. And this is an image, for example, of Tongzhou. This is a district in Beijing, a former county seat. And Tongzhou now, Beijing will move the municipal government of Beijing city to Tongzhou because they want the center of Beijing where the Great Hall of People is and so on. This should be only reserved for the national government, so they will move a lot of urban functions to other parts of the city. And so here a whole new city is built, and Tongzhou is actually at the end of the Grand Canal, which is old waterway built in the 14th century, but it was before this renovation project, it was only used as a also kind of sewage canal out of Beijing. And now they in the meantime, this is only the design, but it's already nearly completed. And looks like this. And now I come to this Liangma River, and it's a smaller river going from the center of the city to the east. And it has a total length of 11 kilometers, and 5.5 kilometers are now renovated as a recreation area. And it's, as I said, it's, the government invested a lot, but, and it's in a better part of Beijing where a lot of good hotels are, where the embassies are, and but people like it and use it. You can rent here. You can rent boats and stand-up paddling. You can have a walk. You can old men are going for fishing and even also for swimming. And in the night it's illuminated, and there is small stages. Sometimes it's organized music events, but also people just bring their equipment and sing and dance. And if you go, I said 5.5 kilometers are renovated. After these 5.5 kilometers, it looks more like this. It's also like a kind of sewage canal, and then there you find still some settlements of the poorer people. This is a settlement for people who work as these drivers for the couriers, the people who bring the all these online packages to the and of course, I think once these rivers are renovated, of course, you have also these settlements will be gone, and there's a lot of there's the last part of this river. There it has more water again because it receives water from the wastewater treatment plant, and there's new housing, and I guess they sell it also like housing near the river. And last but not least, I want to show you a few video stills from a video I found from South China Morning Post, and that shows how the river was used. Recently, Beijing had partly lockdown because of the pandemic. People were asked to work from home office, and all public parks were closed, and also the restaurants and the everything was closed. But this part of the river was still accessible. And so a lot of people discovered this river, and they went there for swimming, and since the restaurants were closed, they met there for having picnic, and they went fishing, and some people offered haircuts because also the haircuts were closed. And but then of course the government panicked, and they fenced off everything, and they had these signboards. I found when I walked down the river, these signboards are still there, but the fences are gone now, and people still, of course, use it, and they tell you also, for example, you should not go swimming, but people do it. And so I think in that film from South China Morning Post, they also say it's one of these last points where people show that they do not everything what the government is telling them. And this was my short report from Beijing, and this is how it looks in the evening. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eva. Wow. Yes. It's a really interesting journey to see the differences, no? Like what a contrast it makes, especially from this political aspect of it. And but I think it's the things that we are very familiar with when we talk about China, like the scale, the speed, yeah, and yeah, the absolute difference of approach, comparing the other two cases where we have the democracies and that the relationship to the state is completely different, and that defines it. But one thing we have all our critical visions also of it, but on the other hand, if you have good intentions and a good vision and a good plan, you can really implement them very well there. Something that is a lot harder in other places. That's what we experience strongly also in Brazil, is so that sometimes, or even especially here in Germany as well, no? So if you think about I don't know, the attempts to turn the Tempelhof airport into something else, and all the plans that have been done so far, no matter how good or how bad they were all refused by the population. Everybody said and I mean, there are many, you can analyze it in many ways, but if you would build, say, for example, just a part of it that is close to the train line, protecting a little bit from the noise and things, and then you have a couple of apartments offered also for the people that we have this demand. So but everything is stopped, absolutely stopped, because you know, the process here requires this both transparency and participation of the population, and it stops anything from actually happening. Whereas in China, even though you can criticize a top-down decision, if the decision is a good one, then you can very quickly solve problems. And I had the impression that when I left, which is beginning of 2019, that I spent more time there, I had the impression that in a few years' time, maybe 5, 10, or I don't know, if China wanted, it could be like the greenest country in the world, and it would be like an example for everybody else, and nobody would have seen it coming, but it actually, it's possible. No? It's not, and I would be curious to hear or your opinion on that. And also, since the decisions are made like that, and we know there is a huge sensitivity to bottom-up initiatives, what would be the way, how can these policies be influenced in a healthy way? No? Because of course, if you do it in a classical, go to the streets and raise up a flag and say we want to take care of our rivers, that's not really going to be well seen. But maybe, I don't know if other what are the doorways to produce change?
I think there are. I'm thinking of, but that is also already now almost 20 years ago. There was an American water activist. Her name is Betsy Damon, and she worked also a lot in China. And she worked first with the Chengdu government, and then she came and she made a very nice, it's called Living Water Garden. And it was the first, this kind of idea to have a water garden. And meanwhile, I think you know Chengdu quite well because you have been in Sichuan. They made a lot about this inner city river. Also, they did also a lot of renovation, and she came to Beijing, and somehow, because I had also some contacts with some water people, we found we could introduce her to the Beijing Water Authority, and they were really interested because they wanted to do something about their water, and they offered her actually a kind of advisor job, and she worked for more than a year and did some. I'm not so sure how much was implemented, but she worked on the reconstruction of a river in the north of Beijing, and how much of her ideas were finally taken. Of course, they never take everything, but at least at that time they were open for that, and I think it. Of course, you can. It's not so much space for the public initiatives, but you can, if you find some officials, local officials who are open for these kind of ideas. And of course, now this is an example from Beijing, and Beijing has a lot of money, and especially this Liangmache, that's their showcase, and they label it as a Seine of Beijing. And but all other, once if there is a very good example, all other cities follow, and they say, oh, we want to have the same. And I know now from a lot of cities who were able to make some quite nice public spaces also. Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps even these international corporations, if I think about Gatesat and the agency, perhaps those things, and even, I mean, your involvement there, if they are already aware of the importance of the topic, then perhaps there is an openness to learn and improve their systems and accept voices from as you say, as advisors from the outside.
Well, and what I showed is initiative from these people who did these water walks. This became also a movement, that it was not only limited to Beijing, it was all over the country. People met, and then it was a kind of activity, just hiking or walking. The last walk I did with them, it was 25 kilometers, but it was a walk not in the mountains, it was in the city. But anyway, they did it in a lot of cities, and then they post the photos, and it's not a very nice scenery very often, and it's then sometimes you walk along these very bad smelling rivers, and people post it and people discuss this, and then of course also the governments feel, oh, we need to do something about this, and people are interested in our waters. And that, I think this was also maybe one of the
Perhaps the tactics are a bit different, no? Because if you would use something like you did, Annie, that would have been too much. But just the fact that the people are close to the water, and it's a bit of a very, very natural thing, just an activity. It has no symbols, it has nothing that can be used as propaganda in a sense. but you're still mobilizing the people and generating some yeah, like connecting their lives into the like creating an experience and a relationship to the topic in a very natural way that it's almost hard to criticize, no? Like what exactly, which part of it would you kind of grasp to be able to criticize? So I think it's yeah, a strategy that how to operate, no?
Absolutely, yeah. It's interesting to think about how that operates in different political climates. But yeah, it's strategic what we do. Also, like some of actually what Eva has been sharing about China is not terribly dissimilar. Like the part where you mentioned that it's nice to just speak to people in the municipality directly, like present yourself as an expert, a consultant, say that you have certain experience, and then there are these new ideas that you're sharing with them. Like here in our like dysfunctional democracy, I guess is a way to define it. This seems to work. Formal processes of involving the public in taking their ideas or complaints into account, they're not really working that well. Like there is no direct pipeline from public opinion to decision making actually, but that's one way, and we've been surprised that it's like actually quite open. There's maybe this expectation of antagonism, and when we approach it with constructive, positive ideas and solutions, it's been okay also. And then sometimes we're using those channels to just like propose ideas. So because now we have a little bit more international visibility, like the Sofia municipality wasn't too familiar with the new European Bauhaus initiative and how now in public involvement and green infrastructure are really important in cities on the EU level. So we kind of were in the position to inform them and consult them, like especially the culture department of Sofia. Then, you know, like culture is now much more involved with the European Green Deal. So maybe you should like include this in your competitions for next year in your policy. So we kind of are starting to do this consulting thing a little bit, but it's been very strategic from the start, and we've kept it that way to look for cooperation and for solutions, not to just fashion this as like criticizing a problem, but to show like, see, it could be completely different. So just as you say, Kika, like you're feeling that's the spirit of the initiative, to just show something which everyone can get behind. And also we talk to the authorities or try and get them on board, and so it's also a bit of good publicity for them too. So it's like we're kind of making this proposal which it's really hard to find fault with, and that does unite a lot of people, and then everyone would like the city to be nicer, and if it's a point of contention it's that it's just not. And so this is a tactic where we have been able to just like start a conversation with it's more challenging now that we're trying to talk about, like, we would like longer term change, which requires much more investment. Like until now, it really just needed permission, and they've helped with like a minuscule amount of funds and just making the process a bit easier. Like closing the street for a delivery if we need to like bring something down to the river. Just one branch of the municipality gave us shovels one time because we were making a garden in another space, you know. So it's a positive relationship, and like something like this, just proposing not just pointing out problems, but proposing solutions, I guess, is a constructive way to engage with governments that may not be super willing to engage in the general case.
Yeah, it's altogether a different approach. I mean, I was also found it interesting, as you mentioned, with the population, Eva, with how they in the end don't necessarily do everything that they are told. It's a little bit of a pretending thing, no? So as long as you're on the surface and on most things you're kind of behaving, so to speak, but then on a more like everyday life level, they are quite free to do whatever. And I guess there are less cameras in the rivers as well.
sometimes it's also these regulations are very strange. So they first renovated the river and they built also kind of terraces, and then on the riverside there is also some restaurants, but first they didn't allow the restaurants to put their tables and chairs on these terraces, but it's very nice. And now finally I discovered they have allowed this, but first it was not allowed, and I think it's also a little bit like learning by doing. And also of course swimming at the moment, mostly it's some elderly men who do this, but not everybody. But of course, there's so many people and it was so hot in summer. If everybody jumps into that river, I think that would be so. The authorities are also a lot always also a little bit afraid what will happen. And so there's a lot of no swimming and no going onto the grass and no, but then still some people, mostly elderly people, they don't care about and don't do it, and it just
It's also what you brought with the pandemic now that happened also worldwide, that people just had to be outside and realize the value of it a lot more, and then not necessarily having the chance to travel somewhere just to discover these little the importance of the little spaces, as you also said, Anina, like not disregarding small spaces and the close areas to you, but just rediscover them in a different way, Would anybody else like to comment or ask Eva anything else?
I just want to express my gratitude for being able to hear you both. It's so amazing to get the opportunity to hear the perspective of what China is doing in Beijing now. As I told you, I've been to Beijing in 2002, 20 years ago. And I was very much connected to China through friends in Australia. I had a few Chinese friends, and I learned some Mandarin. I've forgotten almost all of it, but anyway, it's interesting how you can see similarities between Bulgaria and Brazil and Portugal and China and the movements, and even though they're very different approaches, but there's still the water and the river and the meandering in between, and we are meandering along culture and meandering along local authorities and finding a way to get connected to it and somehow support those movements. And I find really impressive like how China is moving towards these, let's put it as an ecological connection. I know it's top to bottom. It's very different from what we've been doing in Brazil mostly, but still it's very powerful. And I see, of course, there are limitations of that approach, but I find that very interesting how it's somehow setting the stage for something new. Because as you said, they learn by doing, and they're learning by doing some very interesting things. Maybe there are some mistakes, but there are always mistakes anyway. So why not trying to do the best they can and learn as they go, and let's see what comes. Thanks for sharing, Eva.
Thank you.
In different places, like we're relearning this basic coexistence with water and the more organic relationship. Like in Portugal, you were saying there still is this very intensive agriculture, and now it's relearning a process of using the resources just in a fuller way. It's not just like, oh, here's water, let's bring it to the vegetables, but okay, it's community building and it's restoring the landscape. It's doing many things at once. And they love this like multifunctional thinking of what the water can be doing in the city. In Beijing, it can be public space. It can be sports, recreation, haircuts. It's great to see that actually this change is happening in local ways in so many different places.
I think altogether is also a natural process, historically thinking, that, with the mindset of industrial processes and what was needed for that, and to optimize the city structures and things, it might have made sense really at that period in time, and things only take a very long time to change. We unfortunately lost a lot of wisdom in terms of nature, of natural processes that we just ignore, and that it's not something that you need to scientifically, they're just natural processes that if we had remained connected to this primitive senses, it would have already not led to so many problems that we have now. And I think we're all together trying to go back again a little bit in those things, and like reconnect as humans also to ourselves and to our bodies, and then that taken into ecology, saying no, a river is not only transport means, not only but come on, it's the blood of the earth, and it's connecting everything. And in a way, it is a bit of a natural process that we changed and into this rational absolute thing, and then go back and understand the organic again and try to give it space once more. And I guess it just takes a lot of time. And the problem that most of the decision makers, perhaps they are still in a mindset, or many of them in a mindset of this old theories, and also the profit-oriented ones, or whatever is simpler to. So I guess the more we can, with different strategies, connect the dots, both as in giving these impulses for policymakers and change makers, decision makers, but making this bridge also for the consciousness of the population of this connection to our natural resources, and we as human parts of this nature, and being nature, actually. I think as long as we can, whatever initiatives there are, that we spark a bit of an inspiration to connect those dots, I think it's a battle, but still worth fighting for.
It's interesting to me that like when you do it, like it's just obvious that people instantly kind of get it and connect. Like when you look at the two images of Beijing, of the water just in the concrete artificial bed, and then with the terraces and greenery near it and people near it, like which one would most people prefer, Probably most people would be drawn to the greener one with the people near it. And with the story you shared, Kika, about the local rapper who appeared in the Sao Paulo park, I was like, oh yeah, it's like amazing. We don't maybe see like the young citizens and the elderly interacting together in the park, but like, hey, when you see it, it's like, oh, like of course this is like a great thing. We've had this experience too, where people just stop by and it's like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, this is really nice. Oh, great, it's great you're working on this, with the students or whatever. So yeah, there's just something in it where the project is its own justification. It's just so clear to people this is valuable. So I hope more and more examples will just continue more momentum, because this is, people like water and they like being near water together. It's just a very natural thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I personally love to hear about the elders going to the rivers in Beijing. That's so lovely.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Swimming and
fishing.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful, amazing.
they go swimming even in winter when the river is frozen. They hack some parts of the river and then go swimming.
Amazing.
Yeah, awesome. John, I don't know if you're still there, but
Here.
since we are such a small group, hello, John.
Yeah, I'm actually there. So
Okay.
and I took part to land, and also I have been a listener. Yeah, I made myself to be a listener, and I'm learning a lot. Yeah, from I think from 3 continents, from Asia. Yeah, now it is different. Now I used to hear about China, and also I got the opportunity also to learn about South America and even Europe. So this is quite of learning, yeah. So I decide to be listening and see to get connected one by one, so that next time I will be the one to also contribute on my side, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I wanted also to open up the space. If there's anything you would like to share, if we have here a moment, I don't know if you I know you didn't prepare a presentation or anything like that, it's not necessary, but just to give you the space if you'd like to share something that you've been doing as well, yeah, please feel welcome to do so.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think, yeah, Africa is a bit behind, but when it comes to my country, so most of the thing, like we don't have a very well organized city, like the way Beijing was looking, and also like the way Sofia was looking, yeah, and also the Sunfallow, yeah. So yeah, I have quite a lot of things to learn compared to what to tell. Yeah, so that's why I decided to keep quiet. Like for us, we just got independent in 2012, 2011. So we are trying to organize the city when it comes to water. So we are still behind. We don't even have running water, leave alone talking about sewage. So that's one of the quite difficult thing. So, and for me, yeah, when it comes to water is really in need. So we have natural resources. The longest river in the world, it passed through my country. So it's called River Nile. So when it comes to water resources, we have a lot of it. And even now, so we are not making good use of it because in my village, so more than 2,500 people have been displaced recently by flood. So they're living on the street, and most of their properties has been destroyed and damaged. So life has been lost. So we have resources, but only that we lack technology and human development or human resource to make use of these resources we have here. So through our initiative, we decide to work in education so that we can open the eyes of community. So currently we have a primary school whereby we provide basic education for more than 500 students here in my village. And also other 5 villages, so they used to come because though we are still under 3 school, but it is offering and also opening the eyes of the community and to see the education and good part of it. So that's how we are now, and also we are in the part of energy sector. So our country, we are very small population, but the country is big. So we are only 12 million, and And from these 12 million, so it is only 1% of each population that have access to electricity. So we are quite a bit behind. So it is really nice to learn from the 3 presentations, and I was really happy and feel like so I was in correct place, if I can put it in that way. Yeah, because growing, it needs learning, and so this is the part of it now. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining, and wow, congratulations on your work. 500 students, that's amazing. I'd be curious to hear, John, if the situation is so challenging as you describe it, from basic infrastructure and things, where does your main source of hope come from? No? Because we were discussing the different strategies that we have in the different contexts. So we know in Brazil we cannot rely that much on the government to give us the structure. So we need to organize ourselves bottom up, but still, even though we cannot rely fully, it's also not as if we do have, no, we do have water supply, we do have sewage organized. So it's like, as you say, we are not that young as a country. We have already 500 years history, so a lot has been done already, even if it was not super organized and if it's not super trustworthy, but still there is a lot there. So we know that it's more about kicking off some processes to generate an impulse to see. It's a back and forth a little bit of the forces, that we stimulate, then try to get help also from the private sector, as Ani was saying, that most of her sponsors are actually initially, and then you get the attention of the public, of the government, but you also are working in partnership with private companies to get. So I'd be curious, and in China it's a different situation, but I'd be curious, where do you get most of your support from? Do you have to organize everything yourselves and your direct networks of people that you know, as in families and things, or where can you expect to get a bit of support from when you ever do have support? Where does it come from?
So thank you so much. Like for us to have foundation, it will not be a long story, but I just want to bring to your attention how we came into our foundation. So I got opportunity to get the government scholarship to go to Ethiopia. So when I went to Ethiopia for my first degree, so Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering, so I went there and I was feeling like we live in different world. Yeah, and so I came back in 2018. So, and then there was no changes. So I came up with idea to found a foundation that can provide the basic infrastructure like school in the villages, distribute solar lamp to students who are living in town, and also plant trees, because our national trees have been cut down and now it is affecting us directly. So to come back to the source of our resources, our source is individual contribution. So we have a members. If you are a member and you are able to contribute, so at least $5 per month. That's where we used to, like now we don't give salary to our volunteers. We have 12 teachers that used to teach in our primary school. And these teachers, so they don't have shoes, they don't have clothes, they don't have salary. So we decide to buy some clothes and take them to distribute it to them, and also we give them something for soap. Yeah. So that's where we used to get our money. The other side was to look for friends outside Africa or within Africa, or organization to fund our initiative so that we can continue with operation. But since we started in 2018, so it has been quite difficult because of coronavirus. So yeah, we did not make it to get grant. So now we are still struggling to contribute, and economic is getting hard. So that's where we used to get our source of income. And to the government side, we tried to approach, but our government is trying also to stabilize the country. So we don't have any hope on government. So that's where we are now. So what we do is to look for good friends outside, and also for organizations that work in the same field where we are working in. Yeah, that's what we do. But we are officially operating, and also we are registered as a national organization. We have all the documents, and we are in place as a government, as a organization. Yeah.
How did you get in touch also with this Bosch alumni network, John?
Yeah, thank you so much. It was through training, what they call social innovation for a local organization in Africa. Is part of program of Bosch alumni network. So that's how I came in, and I consider the ideas I have are like innovative. So I was selected and participated in the program for 6 months. And then after training, I was then signing and be a part of the alumni. That's how I came in. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for sharing all that with us, your journey, and again, congratulations for your work. It's very, honestly, very humbling to hear you saying, relating everything that you're been doing, because from all the context, there is really no doubt that yours is the most challenging of all. And it touches me very deeply, because if we open the media here in Europe, in most places, you will see at least, I don't know, 10 reports from 20 altogether will be about the Ukraine war. And I'm not saying that's not a terrible thing. It is a terrible thing. But on the other hand, I just feel that there are a lot of urgent matters around the world, and we are speaking about levels of, that's it, urgency, no? Because the situations we have described in the other locations, they all are necessary. They're all matters that need to be taken care of, but there are, that's it, levels of urgency. And I feel that this basic level of infrastructure that is lacking in resources in your context is just so very urgent, that yeah, I mean, I'm glad we again had the opportunity to hear your report as well, and to take this with us, and at the same time know that we are connected, and whatever there is that we can in any way support you also with your activities, please do reach out. Yeah.
That's a huge project. I mean, John was very humble in presenting it. It's like, oh, you know, we're behind and this and that. I guess he meant the country in general, but it's like, you founded a school. That's crazy. That's a big deal. Okay.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for solidarity. So I really appreciate that. Yeah. And I'm humbled to hear that. Yeah.
Sounds like we're really making an impact, for sure.
Yeah. With that, I don't know if you guys feel we can perhaps be wrapping up. I don't know if there are any last reflections and thoughts you would like to share. Otherwise,
It's good to see people working locally with the conditions that they have, you know. I find that really inspiring. Not looking for something perfect, but just like looking around and seeing what are the resources and what are the gaps, and just trying to connect something and make something out of that with the people there and what you have. So I think that's great.
Yeah, I guess the big lesson is exactly what you say, Annie. It's not about there is no perfect system, either politically, economic. There is just the reality that you have, and you need to just be very much pragmatic and say, okay, this is what we got, both in terms of, if you're thinking about a place, what do we have on physical materials and physical context, but also the political, economical situation, social situation, cultural background and things. And then you just have to take what's there, look at what's, you know, and then work with whatever you have. Also considering the fact that we are more and more internationally active. Each time that you go, you need to first of all understand what is that context. Even let's say if we at some point would manage to contribute to your project in any way, John, the first step, we would have to understand more deeply what it is at all, so that we can, because otherwise we come with methods from other places that wouldn't really work in your context. No? So it's really about understanding that context, and just dealing with whatever is there. But yeah, I can only thank you all for this very enriching talk here on a Sunday morning, evening, afternoon. Wish Eva a very good night, rest of sleep.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Annie.
Yeah.
Thank you, Guy. Yes.
So,
Thank you, everyone.
this was really nice. I'm glad that I found it.
Yeah. So I will download the recording and share with you. And I guess, and I made also a couple of screenshots. I don't know if they were all in great, but anyway, if you feel like perhaps I can link us through email, and if you want to use it for something, maybe we just let us know each other to what, and if anybody feels uncomfortable with something, then we say, if not, then we just use it. Yeah. Okay,
Cool.
all right, so thank you again, and wish you all a nice evening for you, Eva, rest of the day for everybody else.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Ciao,
Bye.
queridos. Bom dia. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao. 再见.
再见.